In college football, every weekend tells a story, but some Saturdays feel bigger, heavier, more electric. The kind of day where momentum swings right the plot, field position becomes a character of its own, and 5 games can shift the entire pulse of the season. November 15, 2025, isn't just another date on the schedule. It's a slate loaded with pressure, opportunity, and programs clawing for control as the playoff race tightens. Welcome back to another high-stakes edition of Beyond the Box Score, the home of deep-cut analysis, razor-sharp predictions, and the kind of storytelling that makes every down feel larger than life. Before we dive into these matchups and lock in 10 free picks, 5 sides and 5 totals, make sure you're subscribed. Make sure that Betfold is more than prediction, it's the chess match beneath the surface. The first stop on this gridiron journey takes us to Nippert Stadium, where the Arizona Wildcats and Cincinnati Bearcats collide in a showdown built on tension, discipline, and the fight for rhythm. Arizona walks into this matchup like a team that understands exactly who it is. They don't win with chaos or bursts, they win with poise. Noah Fifita has become the quiet heartbeat of this offense, navigating pressure with the kind of calm that makes defensive coordinators slam clipboards. He doesn't force throws, he doesn't panic. He spreads the field, keeps the chains moving, and allows the Wildcats to breathe when pockets close. And then there's Ismail Mahdi, the back who never seems to lose balance. He doesn't need explosive runs, he just needs room, a crease, a sliver of daylight. His steady production gives Arizona the rhythm they crave, letting the offensive script unfold on their terms. On the other side, Cincinnati remains the more stable and powerful roster, especially at home where they've held firm throughout the season. They should be favored, and they will be favored. But cracks exist. Penalties show up at the worst times. Their pass coverage has gaps that smart offenses exploit. And when facing a team like Arizona, a team that thrives on timing, structure, and incremental progress, those cracks become pathways. Arizona hasn't covered in 7 of its last 8 underdog games. Cincinnati hasn't covered in 5 of its last 8 as a favorite of 5 or more. Something has to give, and in a matchup shaped by rhythm, control, and the kind of quiet execution Arizona loves, the direction becomes clear only after studying every angle. The Wildcats as underdogs cover the spread as the full game side pick. And if the pace is slow, the possessions long, and the mistakes minimal, then the final shape of the tempo becomes predictable. Both defenses tightening, both offenses grinding, both teams eating clock instead of exploding. That brings us to the total. Cincinnati's red zone defense stiffens at the right moments. Arizona's top 20 defensive unit closes windows like a team built for field position battles. This matchup shrinks possessions, shrinks scoring chances, and shrinks opportunities to blow past the number. The under becomes the full game total pick. Next comes a game wrapped in tension and contradiction, Michigan versus Northwestern. The markets looked at this matchup with raised eyebrows, cautious lines, and hesitation around a Michigan team that sits at 7-2 but hasn't played like a typical top 20 powerhouse. The Wolverines are a contradiction on paper. Elite record, modest identity, and a 3-6 record against the spread that scares off casual bettors. But when you peel back the layers, you see a team built for late-season surges. Bryce Underwood can look methodical one week, then detonate with big play energy the next. Their offense has crossed 24 points in 6 of its wins. Their defense remains one of the toughest, most disciplined fronts in the conference. And that makes this matchup fascinating because Northwestern strolls in with a resume that demands respect. They beat Penn State. They beat UCLA. They pushed Oregon into deep water. They played Nebraska tight. They've overachieved all season, even if they now find themselves on a 2-game losing streak. This is what makes the matchup dangerous. Michigan is the better team, but Northwestern is the trickier one. Slowly, as the pieces align, the final answer emerges. Michigan to win and cover the spread as favorites is the full game side pick. And when Michigan finds rhythm, when the offense clicks, when Underwood sees the field cleanly, when the trenches tilt in their favor, points follow. Northwestern will attempt to drag this game into structure, slowing tempo and limiting mistakes. But Michigan's cluster scoring, once ignited, creates a path for the over. And so over the projected total becomes the full game total pick. Our journey next heads to Acrisure Stadium, where Notre Dame and Pittsburgh prepare for a matchup dripping with legacy, pressure, and underestimated firepower. On paper, these programs don't look equal. Notre Dame carries national weight, spotlight pressure, and a roster stacked with talent. Pittsburgh carries production, toughness, and the kind of statistical dominance nobody pays enough attention to. This year, Pitt owns one of the strongest defenses in the country, 6th in scoring, to be exact, while also fielding a defense ranked 23rd in total production, especially strong against the run. They don't flinch when double-digit underdogs. They handle big spreads like teams with nothing to lose. They've covered their last 3 double-digit dog spots, including an outright stunner against Florida State. Their 7-2 OATS record isn't an accident, it's a blueprint. Notre Dame is the flashier program, but Pittsburgh is the sharper one in this specific spot. The analysis leads to one place. Pittsburgh covers the spread as underdogs as the full game side pick. But the total tells a different story. Notre Dame's defense is one of the most disciplined units in the nation. They suffocate explosive offenses. In 5 of their last 6 wins, opponents never reached 14 points. Navy, NC State, Boise State, Arkansas, all held under control. This game may begin with the energy of a shootout, but Notre Dame slows it with method, patience, and ground control behind Jeremiah Love. Fewer plays, longer drives, less chaos, and with that, the final call becomes clear. The under is the full game total pick. Then we move to College Station, where Texas A&M stands unbeaten, unbothered, and untouchable as they pursue their 10th win of the year. At 9-0, with a 6-0 conference record, the Aggies have the look of a team built not just for success, but for domination. Last week's 38-7 destruction of Missouri proved what this team is when its offensive line takes over a game. 40 attempts, 243 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, and a push up front that grew meaner each quarter. On the opposite sideline stands South Carolina, a team tough enough to fight, but battered by a season that has exposed its flaws. Lenora Sellers has talent, but talent doesn't matter when you're running from defenders every other snap. 6 sacks against Mississippi, constant pressure, constant chaos. And those issues don't get easier against a defense ranked top 5 in havoc, tackles for loss, and pass rush production. Texas A&M has recorded 34 sacks. Cassius Howell alone has 10.5. And South Carolina ranks 131st in havoc allowed, an impossible gulf to ignore. Through every angle, the conclusion hits with conviction: Texas A&M to win and cover the spread is the full game side pick. And the total? Well, South Carolina has only one chance. Slow it down, muddy it up, make every snap a survival contest. 3 of their last 4 have gone under, and facing an A&M defense this sharp, they'll be forced into protection mode. The under becomes the full game total pick. And finally, we head to one of the most quietly important matchups of Week 12. South Florida versus Navy. A game that carries conference title implications and maybe even a playoff opening path for South Florida. Everything hinges on the health of Navy quarterback Blake Horvath, the engine of their offense, the heartbeat of their game plan. But even if he suits up, and he likely will, Navy's track record against strong defenses paints a grim picture. Fewer than 20 points in their last 2 matchups against North Texas and Notre Dame. A defense ranked 93rd in success rate allowed. A secondary outside the top 100. A red zone defense ranked 128th in points per drive allowed. Those aren't cracks. Those are craters. South Florida brings a top 30 offense in nearly every major efficiency metric and has outscored opponents by almost 18 points per game. They're healthy, balanced, explosive, and climbing at the perfect time. Meanwhile, Navy hasn't covered in 6 straight games. Only one direction stands: South Florida to win and cover the spread as favorites as the full game side pick. And if South Florida continues their tear, 52.3 points per game across their last 6, and Navy continues its defensive collapse, then the total has only one path. Navy has gone over in 4 of its last 5. South Florida has gone over in 6 of its last 7. With both offenses poised to push tempo, the over becomes the full game total pick. Next, Wisconsin versus Indiana becomes the first clash of the day, and the scene in Bloomington feels almost ritualistic at this point. Indiana, a team that has made a habit of asserting early dominance at home, returns from a narrow escape against Penn State with clarity and determination. There is a certain rhythm to the way the Hoosiers play in their own stadium. They strike fast, they stretch leads early, and they stay aggressive even when the scoreboard feels settled. Under Signetti, Indiana has covered the spread in 6 of 8 home league games, and even one of the rare misses came only because of a heartbreaking late Michigan State field goal that erased their cushion with less than a minute remaining. This is a team built to seize momentum and choke out hope before halftime, and it now stands on the edge of a potential national title run if it can simply avoid slipping in these final pivotal weeks. Wisconsin arrives desperate for stability but lacking the tools to craft it. Their defense fights tooth and nail, but their offense ranks near the basement of all FBS programs, 133rd out of 136 teams. When O'Neal left the previous game, the unit collapsed into confusion, with backup quarterbacks unable to complete even routine throws. The scheme looked as if someone switched off the lights and left them to navigate by instinct rather than structure. Their run-heavy identity meets a brick wall in Indiana's 6th-ranked run defense, and the Badgers have shown no indication they can thrive outside that narrow lane. They failed to score a point against Ohio State and Iowa, and even modest defenses have forced them into short, sputtering drives that end without real damage. The comparison between these two programs at this moment feels lopsided. While Indiana escaped disaster last week and survived to keep its championship hopes alive, Wisconsin's victory over Washington at Camp Randall felt more like a temporary relief than any proof of upward movement. In a matchup defined by contrast, the direction of the outcome becomes increasingly clear as the game narrative unfolds, ultimately pointing toward Indiana's ability to win comfortably and cover the spread. Conference games have leaned heavily toward the under, cashing in 5 of 6 with a single push on a 37-point total against Iowa. Their offense struggles to reach even 7 points against disciplined defenses, and Indiana ranks 5th nationally in total defense, 5th in opponent third down rate, and demonstrates the ability to dictate scoring pace. While Indiana can light the scoreboard early, it often throttles back after establishing control, leading to slower second halves where the game becomes more about managing the clock than chasing explosive plays. With Wisconsin's injuries piling up at quarterback and running back, and with their conversion rate on third downs ranked 129th nationally, sustained scoring feels improbable. The matchup tilts toward a lower scoring outcome, and the under on the projected total emerges naturally as the game's expected shape solidifies. As the afternoon transitions to Los Angeles, Iowa versus USC introduces an entirely different tone, a collision between a disciplined, suffocating defense and one of the country's most explosive offensive machines. Iowa enters with a season defined by grit and precision, their 3 losses decided by a combined 10 points. Whether on the road or at home, the Hawkeyes stay within reach, avoid self-inflicted chaos, and force opponents into long, grinding possessions. With a 2-1 record on the road and an undefeated mark against the spread in those matchups, Iowa brings the type of structure that travels well in hostile environments. Meanwhile, USC is perfect at home, 5-0 straight up and nearly flawless against the spread. The Coliseum has become a comfort zone for a Trojans offense that racks up over 500 yards per game, and yet, for the first time this season, they face a defense capable of absorbing and redirecting that pressure. Iowa's defensive discipline was on full display against Oregon, where despite being pushed around physically, they held the Ducks to just 16 points and maintained a chance to win until the final seconds. USC, in contrast, relies on bursts of speed and multi-level passing attacks that punish lapses in coverage or communication. But Iowa doesn't crack easily, and their losses are rarely blowouts. USC's advantage is clear in explosiveness, but Iowa's advantage is found in patience, field position, and steadiness, the traits that allow underdogs to dictate tempo. The more this matchup unfolds, the clearer it becomes that Iowa has the resilience to stay within the number, cover the spread, and force USC into a far more methodical contest than the Trojans prefer. The total further emphasizes that direction. Iowa's season has leaned heavily toward the under, with a 4-4-1 mark in multiple games where opponents failed to reach even double digits. Their defense hasn't allowed more than 28 points in any game this season, creating a ceiling for opponents regardless of environment. USC, despite its high-powered offense, faces a unit unlike any it has seen at home, and Iowa's control-oriented style keeps the clock running and the field short. USC will score, but the matchup points toward contained production rather than fireworks. Iowa will shorten drives, reduce possessions, and drag the game toward the under as the natural flow emerges. Further south, the heat and humidity of Miami create the setting for NC State versus the Hurricanes, a matchup steeped in pressure for the home team. Miami's season hangs in a delicate balance, with 2 losses already on the ledger and a difficult road trip to Pittsburgh waiting after this one. NC State arrives on the heels of an emotional upset of Georgia Tech, the kind of surprising performance that scrambles ACC standings and raises questions about consistency and letdowns. For Miami, the first question is how they respond to that emotional weight, knowing that every game from this point forward shapes their postseason fate. For NC State, the question is whether they can replicate the magic or whether their defense, ranked 120th in total defense and second to last against the pass, will once again prove too porous to survive a full 4 quarters. Carson Beck leads Miami's passing attack and finds himself matched against one of the weakest pass defenses in the country. NC State has allowed 36, 53, and 36 points in its last 3 games, and opponents have exploited their secondary with relative ease regardless of offensive style. Miami, though uneven at times, has the ability to stretch the field with Tony on the perimeter and punish defensive lapses with Fletcher pounding inside. NC State, while capable of explosive scoring themselves, as seen in their 48-point performance against Georgia Tech, has not shown the same ability to slow anyone down. Early sharp movement toward Miami on the betting line reflects a recognition of these mismatches. As the narrative develops, the path leads toward Miami's ability to win convincingly and cover the spread in a matchup where the Hurricanes' strengths align perfectly with NC State's weaknesses. The total for this game shifts focus to offensive tempo and scoring capability. Miami comes off a 38-point performance against Syracuse, and NC State gives up points in bunches, allowing more than 45 in multiple recent games. This isn't a matchup of conflicting strengths but rather a meeting of teams that both lean toward offense and show vulnerabilities on defense. Miami can stretch the field quickly, and NC State plays with enough offensive firepower to keep pace, at least for stretches. The game shapes into a battle of explosive plays, long drives, and mismatched defensive units, ultimately flowing toward the over on the projected total. Moving to Boston, Georgia Tech versus Boston College introduces a contrast between expectation and reality, between a team with playoff aspirations and one whose 1-9 record hides a surprising amount of fight. Georgia Tech brings an 8-1 record into the matchup along with a 6-3 mark against the spread, but the story beneath the surface is more complicated. Many of their wins have come by 15 points or fewer, suggesting that while they find ways to win, they aren't consistently dominating large spreads. Their recent loss to a struggling NC State team raised further questions about their ability to maintain composure in pressure situations. Boston College, meanwhile, has remained competitive despite its record, covering in 2 of its last 3 games, both of which came against strong opponents like Notre Dame and SMU. Boston College's pass-heavy identity aligns neatly with Georgia Tech's biggest defensive vulnerability. With the Eagles averaging around 270 passing yards per game, 29th nationally, they now face a Georgia Tech secondary that sits 82nd and often allows opposing quarterbacks more space than they should. Georgia Tech has the offense to score against a Boston College defense ranked near the bottom in total yardage and scoring defense, but Boston College's resilience as a double-digit underdog cannot be dismissed. They have covered 10 of their last 15 in that role. Senior night brings an emotional boost, with 29 seniors taking the field for the final time at home, creating an energy that could help Boston College stay within the spread despite the mismatch. As the full story rounds out, the expectation lands on Boston College covering as underdogs. The total follows the rhythm of these 2 offenses and their defensive limitations. Georgia Tech consistently reaches at least 30 points in ACC play and recently put up 36 on the road. Boston College has allowed at least 28 points in 5 of 6 recent games, but their offense also finds space against defenses like Georgia Tech's, which allows nearly 400 yards per game. Boston College's up-tempo, pass-oriented attack ranks 35th in plays per game, meaning possessions multiply and the scoreboard moves quickly. With 5 overs in their last 6 November games, and with both defenses likely to face long afternoons, the matchup naturally steers toward the over. Finally, Tuscaloosa becomes the stage for Oklahoma versus Alabama, a collision of giants shaped by memory, revenge, and playoff desperation. Alabama has been flawless at home this season, winning each game by double digits and covering the spread in all of them. Their stadium has become a fortress, and the lingering sting from last year's loss to Oklahoma, a defeat many believe cost them a playoff berth, adds emotional fuel to an already intense matchup. Ty Simpson has emerged as a legitimate Heisman candidate, throwing 21 touchdowns with only 1 interception, reading defenses with surgical precision, and thriving behind an offensive line that gives him the confidence to manipulate even the most complex coverage schemes. Oklahoma arrives with one of the best defenses in the country, ranking 8th in scoring and 4th against the run. But their offensive struggles stand in stark contrast. John Mattier's inconsistency in the passing game has left Oklahoma ranked 62nd in passing and 93rd in rushing, a troubling combination when facing an Alabama defense that thrives on forcing mistakes, especially at home. Turnovers and penalties lean strongly in Alabama's favor, and the Sooners' inability to sustain drives through the air since Week 7, ranking 125th in passing down predicted points added, creates an uphill battle. Alabama's offense, meanwhile, matches up well against an Oklahoma secondary that has shown cracks in recent weeks, particularly against strong passing offenses. With third down success leaning heavily toward the Tide, and with Alabama's dominance at home remaining one of the clearest trends of the season, the game narrative builds toward Alabama covering the spread. The total between these SEC titans shapes itself through defensive dominance and recent trends. Their previous meeting produced only 27 total points, and both teams enter this year with elite defenses and offenses showing signs of fatigue as the season wears on. Oklahoma has scored 26 or fewer in 3 of its last 4 outings, and Alabama's offense has dipped recently as well. The under has hit in 12 of the combined 18 games played by these two teams this season, including 3 straight unders for Alabama at home. Both teams slow opponents, force long possessions, and create a style of football that leans toward physical trench battles rather than shootouts. Oklahoma allows only 14 points per game and Alabama allows 17, forming the kind of defensive environment where scoring comes sparingly and victory comes through patience, precision, and resilience. As the storyline comes into full focus, the matchup leans decisively toward the under. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more deep dive analysis just like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a pick. Drop a comment below with the next matchup you want covered, and let me know whether you agree or disagree with today's predictions. And if you're riding with any of these plays, tell me which ones you're locking in. Thanks for watching Beyond the Box Score. I'll see you in the next video.